So the topic of discussion for today is the aquarium snail, specifically the Ramshorn snail and the Malaysian Trumpet snail. So on top of that rock right there is a Ramshorn snail, and below that rock is a Malaysian Trumpet snail. So I want to talk about two myths that involve these two snails. So the first myth is that snails eat aquarium plants. It's a false statement, but there is some truth to that. A snail will only eat a decaying plant or portions of a plant that is decaying. For example, if part of your plant is looking transparent or it's looking hollow and it's not solid no more because it's decaying, the snails will then eat that portion of the plant. But if the plant is lush and is healthy and is vibrant and only a leaf is rotting, the snails will only eat the leaf and it will leave the plant alone. So the second myth is that snails eat fish poop. So the idea behind that myth is that snails, they eat the fish poop so they can digest it and break it up into, smaller portions of poop, which is easier for the plants and the aquarium filter to consume or utilize. So this is my opinion. I don't think any living organism are actually able to benefit off of fish waste, or waste for that matter, because the waste is everything that the fish don't need already. So I don't think that the snails can benefit that much off of the fish waste. So if you see a snail sifting through the fish waste, most likely they are just trying to find maybe portions of the poop that they're able to consume, or just uneaten fish foods, or just decaying plant matter that's mixed up amongst the fish waste. But I don't think snails actually enjoy or like eating fish waste directly. So that is a very big myth right there. Let's talk about the benefits of these two snails. First off, they like to eat algae, mainly dust algae, green dust, brown dust, however you want to call it. They like dust algae, or prefer it over hair algae. And I don't think these snails actually are able to eat hair algae, just because they don't have the mouth to actually break up the algae and consume it. So they would rather prefer the dust algae. Another great thing that these snails can do is that they are master scavengers, but they leave fish eggs alone. So if you're trying to breed fish and you need a bottom feeder that will help eat the uneaten foods that you're feeding your fish, the snails are a great choice because they leave healthy fish eggs alone. The Malaysian trumpet snail is actually a snail that's native to, like what its name suggests, Malaysia. And the reason why it's found its way into a lot of hobbyists' aquarium is because of its habit of burrowing into the substrate. And when it burrows into the substrate, it does two good things. It stirs up the substrate and provides proper oxygen exchange between the substrate and the water column, which can also be beneficial for plants too, because their roots are inserted into the substrate. Another thing that these snails do whenever they are burrowing is that they release their waste into the substrate, and the plant roots can also utilize the waste as a source of nutrients. Now, if snails are so beneficial for aquariums, why do people dislike snails? I can think of 3 solid reasons why people hate snails. The first reason is because snails are able to crawl into filter intakes or get sucked up into the filter and clog up the impeller, sometimes completely immobilizing the impeller, and that's one reason why people dislike snail. The second reason is because snail does not have a lot of color selection. A lot of the color selection are pretty dull looking, brown, black, or gray, or just plain white, and some people don't like that. They have this tank full of tropical, colorful fish, and they just don't like having these dull snails inside their aquarium. So that's the second reason why people dislike snails. The third reason is probably the main reason why people dislike snails, and that is because of their ability to reproduce rapidly in a short amount of time, or in a small environment. But you got to understand why they do that. So snails are literally on the bottom of the food chain, not just in the invertebrate world, but in the aquatic world, period. Fish eat snails, crayfish eat snails, reptiles, amphibians, birds, everything eats snails, and that's why they have to reproduce a lot. And I can assure you that in the natural habitat, they would not be able to explode in population as they would inside an aquarium, because we just don't have the fish or just the support that, you know, like a natural environment would have. We don't have birds flying over our tank eating snails. We don't have crayfish coming in to eat the snails. We don't have the type of fish that will eat the snails. We just don't have the support to depopulate the snails. That's why the population gets out of control. Now, there are many factors that are involved with snails being able to rapidly reproduce in a short amount of time. Now, you got to understand that snails, they will reproduce regardless, but for them to be able to reproduce rapidly in a short amount of time, they're going to have to need a lot of food, whether it be from you overfeeding a fish and the snail being able to get to those food, or just having too much algae inside your tank, or just your plant is just decaying too much and there's just a lot of food available for the snails. And that's one big factor as to how snails can rapidly reproduce in a short amount of time. There are many different ways that you can actually control the population of these two types of snails. One way is through fish. Now, the first fish that I'm going to mention is called the Indian dwarf puffer. And like its cousins, it's highly carnivorous, but this little puffer is fully freshwater adapted, and it loves eating soft shell snails. But in general, it will eat all kinds of snails. It's a very good pest control fish, but the bad thing about the puffer is that it likes to eat anything that it can eat. So fish fries are not safe, shrimplets are not safe, and I don't even think shrimps are safe too from the Indian dwarf puffer. But it's a great choice for a community tank that has fish that's big enough for the puffer to not bully. The second fish that I want to talk about is the clown loach. The problem with the clown loach is that it loves snails, but it can grow quite large. So if you have a smaller tank, you're just patching a problem with another problem. And that's the reason why a lot of African cichlid keepers have all these colorful African cichlids, but have one or two weird looking clown loaches on the bottom of their tank. And the reason behind that is because their aquarium does not have a lot of crevices or just plants to help shield or make the snails blend in. So most African cichlid tanks that I see just have, like plain white sand or just a lot of flat rocks. And when you have 30-40 snails on the sand, you can see that there's 30-40 snails right there. But if you look on the rocks here, you don't really see the snails unless you pay really close attention to the snail. One method that I've heard of that just does not work is to dip your plants into a bleach and water solution. And the idea behind that is to kill the snail eggs that are attached to the plant, so when you insert it into your tank doesn't get an infestation. But that method just does not work because snails and plants go hand in hand. So sooner or later, when you buy plants from other fellow hobbyists or just, like other stores, you will get a snail infestation no matter what. So if you don't like snails, don't buy aquarium plants. Or you can just buy tissue culture plants, but usually tissue culture plants cost a whole lot more than just regular aquarium plants. This last method is, to me, by far the best method to control a snail population explosion, and that is to manually remove the snails. You can do it by tweezers or just by crushing them, or you can even use snail traps. And you can easily go on to the internet and just type in snail traps or aquarium freshwater snail traps, and be tons and tons of articles written about that too as well. So Manually removing the snails is more effective than buying fish or any other type of control. The only type of snail population control that I have naturally are these assassin snails, and I have around 2 or 3 inside my aquarium. Now the assassin snail, like its name implies, are highly carnivorous too, and they specialize in catching other snails, killing them, and consuming them. So I don't really feel like I need more than what I have inside my tank, because every like 2 or 3 months I'll come inside my tank and siphon them out or manually remove the snails that I don't want. Mainly I remove the duller looking snails. I tend to like to keep the pink or red or blue Ramshorn snails. I don't have a lot of Malaysian Trumpet snails because I just introduced those probably like 4 or 5 months ago, but I only introduced like 1 or 2, so I think they're taking quite a long time to actually multiply. I'm actually wanting that too, and I don't really see these pest snails as actual pests. I actually welcome them into my tank because I know the benefits actually outweighs the problem of having, you know, an excess population of them, because I don't actually overfeed my tank all the time too, so the population grows pretty slow. And I think that it's essential for a planet tank to actually have snails, because they just do so many great things. You know, like if a shrimp dies or if a fish dies, then the snails will jump on it. It just makes the tank feel like a true living ecosystem.